everybody. This is the Get Your Life Project. It's your four soon-to-be favorite millennials, trusting no one and questioning all the bullshit. Welcome to episode 5. Today we'll be talking about the ride or die narrative. This is basically figuring out when enough is enough in relationships, friendships, or families. I think you guys should say who you are. I'm Bambai. I'm going to be the moderator for today's episode.
I am Sierra, or C Birdie, or C Nasty.
I'm Ashley.
Lord.
I'm pretty sure I'm Ashley. Yeah.
Positive?
Yeah.
She's positive. I'm Tiffany, and I'm sex positive.
All right, so let's get into it. What do you guys think is the ride or die narrative? Where does it come from? Like, where have you seen it? I'm going to pull up Urban Dictionary while you all spiel.
Don't pull up Urban Dictionary. You should never pull up Urban.
Totally.
They're going to be like, it's when you be riding and then you die while you riding. Urban Dictionary is terrible.
What do you think it is, Sierra?
Lord. The ride or die narrative is just kind of this, like, it's usually referring to women, which is unfortunate. But it's supposed to be this, like, you got to stick through them no matter what muck you might have to go through to get there. At the end, we expect you to be there standing strong. You better keep it together. Show no fear. Don't let any cracks appear on your face. You better keep smiling. All of that. So
that's your ride or die.
That's your ride or die. You won't be there too thick. And you know, prison guys.
A girl.
Prison guys usually say that. I know I'm like getting there really weird, but they do. They'll be like, "Oh, you gonna stick with me while I'm in jail, girl?"
Yeah,
no,
you know,
I'm not. No. How long you in there? Couple years. Yeah, I'm good.
No riding or dying.
I am not riding or. And why I gotta die?
Come on, Sierra.
I'm not dying for you. I don't know you like that. We just met on Tinder, so no thanks.
But I'm in jail.
Ashley, so you ride or die?
You ride or you die.
Why you not gonna message me when I'm in jail, girl?
I'm not sending you my panties in the mail,
Come
sir.
on now.
Ashley, man, no.
The plot thickens.
Dum. Like, I've heard ride or die like be referred like a ride or die chick, you know, like ride or die. But when I think ride or die, like I think Bonnie and Clyde, but I guess they were like a team and they worked together. They worked together.
They rolled or died.
Yeah, they both died, so I guess it doesn't really work. I think like
both died. Everybody dies.
I don't know, like I've heard of people refer to like that's my ride or die, like that's my homie, like my ride or die homie, you know, stick it till the end, you know, I'm gonna call you up at 3 a.m. We gonna go out and you won't be there for me. We gonna commit this crime and you won't be there for me. It's gonna be fine. Tiffany, you ready for this ride or die? So sorry. You ready?
They're criminals.
We be making pancakes.
I'm gonna ride with you. I would prefer not to die. Like, not dying is preferable if I'm going to like agree to take this ride.
That's not.
I feel like the patriarchy came up.
Oh my god,
patriarchy,
the brotherhood. For like, I don't know. I don't think I've ever heard women, at least not women in my life, refer to a guy as like a ride or die. Like, the ride usually ends. Like, most guys don't get in the car. So most of the time they like don't take the ride with you, and you just end up like dying alone.
Oh my,
jeez. Where the cats? With the cats?
That escalated quickly. But no, I feel like I've heard a lot of guys recently refer to people, or women rather, as like being a rider, which usually means like
they get to do a bunch of bullshit and she'll take it.
And you're responsible for keeping yourself and them intact. And like carrying the weight of like two people.
What's going on?
And like still making yourself available to this person for whatever, but also like taking responsibility for like things that don't belong to you.
That's unfortunate.
That sounds about right. So Urban Dictionary has a lot going on, but the main concept is that you will ride through any problems with this person or die trying. Literal quote unquote, or die trying.
Get rich or die trying.
Any is in capitals, and that includes relationships. So they have here examples of like wife or husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, best friend, family members, because people do that in a lot of relationships where they're like, oh, this is my friend. They've done XYZ stupid things, but I'm still there for them because birth till we die, like we are friends. Or like in families where people are in toxic connections with their family members, and it's like, no, but we're your family, so you gotta stay in here and stick it through. So I don't know, for you guys, how have you seen this playing out? I know the relationship one always stands out. So like, how have you seen it playing out in relationships? And then if you want to touch how you've seen it playing out in friendships and in families.
I actually haven't seen that in friendships that much. But in relationships, it's kind of like we were saying, someone sits there and they're like, yeah, he done cheated on me like 17 times, but I still love him.
So Beyonce.
Beyonce.
Oh, God. Shots fired?
I mean, they got money, don't they?
That's true. That's very true.
I mean, what do that mean?
They don't actually die.
I mean, if she got like her money while she like fed and like partially dying after riding.
I mean, but that does not mean that someone has the ability to go and cheat on you just because they have money. She got her own money. It ain't like their money is together. Like they didn't make it together. So,
and in that narrative, like if she's the one who had been, we don't even know if this is true or if it's a public statement, but let's assume it's true.
Okay.
If she had been the one who had been cheating, would people
Jay-Z
be okay
would have
with
flew out that goddamn house so fast and snatched his kids up. Yeah. He would have burned the crib down while he was walking out of it.
And
but don't
I feel like she would have bounced back though because she Beyonce.
I mean, Beyonce would have been fine if she cheated, but I feel like.
But they have like a business together, right?
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of money than both their incomes
no,
alone,
honey.
or no?
But then isn't that always the case with the ride or die situation where like there is some shared, whether it's a shared like, oh, you know my family, I know all your family, I don't want to deal with it, or it's shared assets.
You think he would have left?
Oh, Jay-Z, yes. Because men never really stay when a woman's the one that is doing anything. If the situation was reversed, if you're sitting here and you're saying,
what other options do you think?
What about people who are in relationships
many, because he cheated on her ass,
guys? What about, you're talking about the cheating, but what about the men who are like, oh, I'm dating this woman and she's acting quote unquote crazy? Like there's some toxic relationships where women are like literally destroying a man's life.
Right?
Isn't that a form of ride or die? Like we don't have a word for that, but
if the guy's choosing to stay with her,
yeah.
But I don't think there's an expectation of staying. I think that's the difference.
Okay.
There's the ride or die narrative for women is like, you better stay with your man, you better stick it through. Yeah. Versus there's no equivalent for a man, but I don't think that anyone's putting that on them.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So like they do it out of choice.
They do that out. They make the conscious choice. There's no societal pressures like saying, you better stay for this relationship.
Yeah.
So. Okay. Everybody's thinking.
Have you seen that in your family?
No.
Okay.
I have not.
Like you don't feel like that way towards any of your family members? They don't feel that way towards you?
Oh, well, if you're sitting there asking me in that specific way, I think that we do have the like family bond where we're sitting here and like, oh, well, you better, be there for your family members. There's like this unsaid expectation of kind of like being there to support your family, even if they might be treating you like crap. So in that sense, yes, I have seen it. But again, there's no word that kind of goes along with the ride or die narrative. It's just like family comes first. And you're supposed to take care of your family, despite how that might, impact you.
I feel like familiar relationships allow the most room for toxicity, but you may not always realize that that's what's happening because it's so much under the guise of, well, they my blood. I gotta be there for them. I'm obligated. It may not necessarily be like, I got ride or die for my mama. We don't that's not necessarily how I think of it in my head. I'm like, but I am obligated to her.
But I bring that up because I'm like, isn't that the pattern that we copy in relationships and friendships? Where it's like in a relationship or even with friends. I know for myself, it's like, okay, this person has done these shitty things, but they're going through something or whatever, and we are bonded. Hallelujah. This is the thing. Or in relationships, this person's done this, but we will go past it and it'll be fine and all of that, which it sometimes is. And that kind of leads into the next question of, is it ever a positive thing or necessary to kind of take on that ride or die role as a way to support someone who you care about?
No.
Don't see her.
No, I don't think that you should ever have a do all be all, because again, I think that's something that kind of comes from back in the day. I like to go back because that's how you figure out what's
You're
happening.
like
right
resident
now.
social historian.
But like not really though. But I feel like when you say like it's like marriage, like you're like that's it till death do us part, and I think that's like the equivalent of a ride or die. But it's like, you want me to be a ride or die, we not married, we don't got no kids, no house, I'm not riding or dying for you. That is not happening, and I don't think that you should put that kind of pressure on yourself, because you can be in a situation, i.e. possibly Jay-Z cheating on Beyonce. And yeah, they got millions together and like 3 babies or whatever. But I'm like, at what point? Solange was beating his ass in the elevator.
Yes.
It was not something that happened that was just like, oh man, shit happens. You don't just fall into somebody.
He did something. We
He
saw
did.
that footage.
Yeah.
We saw
And she
that
doesn't
footage
pretend,
was real.
so-
Yeah, she does not pretend. They didn't say anything about it. Like they didn't speak on it at that point. But
That's because it was $1 billion.
but that doesn't matter though. That's not what you say in response to somebody breaking a vow. Like, it was a lot of money in there, and we didn't want to break it up because of our empire. Fuck your empire, because he obviously doesn't respect you, and
or he doesn't respect you enough to not exhibit that behavior. Like he
Yeah.
wasn't thinking about that.
he wasn't thinking about that when he was in somebody else's cheeks. So there's some $1 billion in the elevator. It was $1 billion, well, $500 million in somebody else's vagina. How about that? Think about that way. That make you feel better? No, that does not make you feel better.
I think the whole Black woman narrative is kind of like a ride or die situation. I mean, you could like equate that. I think like Black women are expected to like be down for like anything, and this can even come into like sort of like, it doesn't have to be relationship wise. It can be like familial, like you were saying. I think like there's certain expectations, like especially within households that are like matriarchal, for like, mom to like be a ride or die. I mean, moms, I guess, generally are
Moms have
expected
to be ride or die.
Moms are have to be ride or dies, but there's to that extent of like sacrificing yourself over like your care. Like moms have to be ride or die, but to like what extent? I know that's like to the extent of like, taking care of everyone before yourself, So I think that's like an interesting kind of layer to like how you can interpret like the ride or die like narrative. I don't think like I think it applies to I think it applies to like other relationships, but I think it's a very interesting take in when you look at like how Black women are expected to kind of like be there no matter what.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, look at the way motherhood is presented. Like, it's sacrifice. Sacrifice. Like, when people talk about fatherhood, it's not described with nearly as much of like an abandoning a part of yourself in order to put like all your life force into like a child. Like I just think that like women are brought up like on different things. What was the question? You said, is it necessary?
Is it necessary sometimes or helpful or no?
I think it is if it feels mutual. If this idea of you being like agreeing to stick with somebody and work through like a rough period when you both may not be experiencing like a rough patch, if you know that the other person is willing to do the same for you, I'm like, I guess at that point it's not really like ride or die. You both are just kind of like there for each other, and it's not one-sided, but like,
but the ride or die narrative is one-sided.
Yeah.
There was like an article about how it was like reasons why a ride or die chick is not wifey material. And it was talking about how like, I didn't agree with everything in it, but it was basically talking about how like, if a person is quote unquote ride or die, that can be a form of manipulation where they can be like, hey, like I've done this for you, so now you have to stay with me, and they will get upset if you don't. A. B, it can be like you're not helping the person grow. So you're like going through this shit, they treat you anyhow, and then like for example, the cheating and stuff like that. And then they don't grow as a person. So you've stayed with them out of love and out of sacrifice that might be pure, but they're not growing as a person in result of it. Like it doesn't challenge them to do better or be better. And now there are ways to stick with someone through something while still challenging them, while still questioning like, hey, like,
Are you sure this is the right thing?
Yeah, are you sure this is the right thing? Or, hey, I don't like how you treated me in this situation. Can we talk about it? Can we, I don't know, go through therapy, whatever you need to do in your relationship to make those things work. But just going through without any kind of like resolve can lead to that lack of growth or whatever with the person. I don't know how you guys feel about that, or like any thoughts.
I mean, the idea that you have to stick with someone, and I guess you could use that as a form of manipulation. But again, that would be dependent upon the person who's receiving the ride or die benefits. Kind of giving a crap, and again, there's like little to no expectation of the other person who's not doing that, unless you're like, again, like you said, Tiff, in a mutually, kind of like we're there for each other relationship.
I feel like the only person who's going to use that behavior to be manipulative is someone who verbally refers to themselves.
Is that right?
Like, you out here calling yourself that?
I think
I'm
like
suspicious.
I think that brings up an interesting point as to like who's putting the pressure on who.
Yeah.
So it's like, are you putting the pressure on yourself, or is somebody exerting that pressure on you to like be the ride or die? Like how, like, you know, at what point, you know, and I think as women, like, we unconsciously do that with ourselves, where we're like, well, I have to do this, I have to be there.
Right.
I mean, there's also that exerting force, but I think at times you forget that you have a choice. And so,
or assume that like one is going to lead to the other. I think we think, if I do this thing because of the narratives we were talking about, I'm going to be more lovable. I'm going to be more of an asset. This person is going to respect me more.
Of a ride or die.
I might be more of a ride or die. This person is going to be that way with me. And it's like, when that doesn't happen, I think that can turn into manipulation. Even if it's not intentional, it can turn into, but wait a minute, like, you can't stand by me through this little thing. And like, I went through everything with you and all of that stuff. Like, I feel like it's not always intentional, but I agree with you that it's like, it can get weird.
I think there's an awareness thing that comes into play too. Because there's the like societal expectations that are kind of underlying within your relationship as well. But then, you know, one person may be more aware that they can get more out of this person if they do this, or like, I can get more out of you if you do this. And I think that's where the honesty has to like come about in terms of like being honest about like how well you know a person, and you know the advantages you can take. I know I'm speaking like very out and open, but maybe I need to think about it a little bit more. But yeah.
I got concerns about the things that we associate with being ride or die behavior. In my experience, when I've been called quote and quote a rider, I've just been being myself. It makes me go back to us starting to like praise mediocrity in like millennial relationships of like every kind. You'd be like, oh, I'm just someone who asks how your day is every day. You are such a rider. What? I just really, it's like the most like mundane behaviors that should be like commonplace and standard if you have decided that you don't want to be like a shitty person.
I think our definition of what that is has like dropped. Like, I'm sure my parents, or like we can all speak to this, like they could depend on their families, friends, partners a lot more than we can, because for some reason we're just like, I'm the most important one. I don't. Yeah. And it's like really
social
toxic.
Media.
Yeah.
It's like we've all gotten really flaky. So when you like come up against one person who is like anti-flake, they're suddenly a writer. I'm like, but I didn't ask for this title. Like, I did not audition. I did not want this bestowed upon me.
The flaky thing. That's like, remember how like you were talking about how people will come, like they'll clothe their flakiness with like, oh, it's for my mental health and blah blah blah. It's kind of going back to that like responsibility thing, because like that idea of like, yes, you need to take care of yourself, but that doesn't mean you ignore the fact that there are people in your life who are affected by the decisions and the things that you're doing. And I think people are very quick either to just dismiss it entirely and not say anything, or they'll treat you like crap but be like, I was feeling this way, therefore my feelings are valid. And they take up room. Like, you will have friendships, relationships, or connections where one person is overwhelmingly taking up room more than the other person, because they're always like, my stuff is more valid than yours. Not directly, but
that's how it feels.
That's how it feels.
I understand that like concept, but I think you have to be. It's a balancing act. You have to be accountable for yourself in terms of like what you are able, what you can and cannot handle.
Yes.
And you have to take into account that as humans, you know, I'm not excusing like any sort of like behaviors, but you have to take note in that, like, just like you process things, you know, you have to go through things and process things and evolve, the other person does as well. I think you have to either you have to like get smart quick, or like be like say what you want, or like whatever it is that you need, like out in the open, and see that person for who they are. So like you can avoid a lot of things in the beginning, like if you guys are just like upfront and honest with each other.
I agree, yeah.
But I do understand that it takes some time to get to a place to know what you want. And that's the problem. We're all in life, in every aspect of life, trying to figure out what it is that we want. I'm not saying that excuses anybody's actions. I mean, it hurts. It hurts when you get hurt. Like it sucks. But you have to like come out of it like kind of trying to be like, next time what can be done differently, or should I have said what I wanted at first, or up front, like, you know,
or even like holding that power.
Yeah,
so like when you giving because you want to, not because you expect the other person to be there for you, or you expect anything from them, but just like, this is who I am, and like I'm just living in alignment with who I am, and if they do whatever they do, great. If they hurt me, I'm going to be able to pick up the pieces and move on faster.
I don't think that necessarily means clothing like your mental. I think that's really like that can kind of be like harsh, like clothing your mental health in like something of like flakiness, because we're not figuring out where we don't know where each other like where we are in our life. So that's
I feel like if it's the once, that's a good point to make. Like that might have been a little problematic of me to phrase it that way. Like I think if you like once in a while, if it's a thing, but if it's a constant,
but if
where
it's a
anytime
constant, the person is aware of it as well by this point. So
hopefully, but if it's a constant, like anytime you're like, hey, I feel this way, the other person's like, I can't process this, whatever, all the time, then either they're genuinely going through stuff, but you have to be like, what are my personal limits, like in dealing with this, or they're doing whatever they're doing and being like, hey, I'm just gonna use this as a reason, right.
Just go by. Usually people like that, in my experience, people who are kind of like, I'm beholden to nothing. I don't know. 2017 has been the year of kind of like denouncing obligation. I don't know if we need like a new word for obligation or what. I don't think obligation is bad. Like if you have decided that like such and such a relationship is like vital to you and it's like important in your life, then you have to acknowledge the impact that your actions are going to have on somebody else, and even like small actions. But usually I think people who say that have had a shit ton of toxic experiences, and they didn't necessarily find the healthiest way to rebound from them. So then they kind of get to a point where their behavior can be like interpreted as like flakiness or like lack of personal responsibility, even if that's not their intention. I've just heard a lot of people being like, oh, well, I'm like this because such and such has happened.
Do you voice like in these instances, like do we voice like the fact that, hey, I don't like what's happening here?
No, not all the time, because I think you have to get to a point of like personal evolution before you're comfortable doing that. Like I think it is like, of course that's how it should be, but we don't always like operate under a should. Like I would love to be like, you know what, I don't tolerate these unhealthy behaviors, and I'm like kind of like,
so wait, as the person who is like receiving,
if I'm on the receiving end of someone who's like that, like no, I'm not always like, hey, this thing bothers me, or your behavior is such and such. It usually takes me honestly a very long time to get to that point, but I know that's something that like I have to work on. But I also know some people are more evolved and are able to like tolerate those kinds of situations less often than I do.
But that could be. Go ahead.
I'm just saying though, that's where the interpretation, you know, in terms of like, see, the feelings are valid to like perceive them as being flaky, or you know, as them being distant, or as them being however they may be. But if nothing is being said, or if nothing is being like, you know, hey, if you're not being vocal in that you're not receiving something, then your interpretation can like keep going on while this other person may just actually just genuinely be going through something, or like you need to like be like, something needs to be said because obviously somebody is suffering. Like
one of you is.
So like if you're aware of the suffering, like I guess
usually I'm very aware of the suffering,
but it goes back
like
to
the
like
other
this,
person's
the comfortability, I suppose. But then judgment happening at the same. I guess for me, it's like there's judgment.
Who's judging?
The judgment in terms of the emotions and what they're being read as flakiness, because you don't know what they are yet because you haven't asked.
But
nobody has like interjected.
I agree with you that they should be a conversation, but also depending on your levels of empathy, sometimes they shouldn't. Like, I feel like for me personally, there's situations where I'm like, it doesn't mean that person is a bad person, but I'm like, if I constantly feel XYZ in interactions with this person, I love them with all my heart, but I can't. If this happens, which has happened in the past, where it's like, oh, this person cheated. I'm like, I love them, but I'm not going to stay and feel this way for the next 6 months because I want it to be ride or die or because I care. I feel like that love sometimes extends into leaving or extends into distancing because it's like, I care about you enough to not stay here and become a toxic person to you because I hold resentment. Or
but she made a choice.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a choice. And I agree with you that there should be a conversation sometimes, but it depends, like Tiff said, on your level of evolving, but also on your personal, just the way you choose to deal with your emotional stuff, where like, you know, your capacities and it's like, oh, this is what I can take and still be myself. Past this point, I'm going to turn into an asshole.
But then you can still keep writing the narrative of those. Sorry.
Do it.
But I'm like, you can still keep writing you can still be all the while you could still be misinterpreting things. It's just because all you have is your own insight. You haven't vocalized anything outside of that to find out what the other
what's going.
Yeah,
I think you definitely have to have discussions.
There's a certain level of someone mistreating you, or there's a certain level of someone having like flakiness in a relationship that you perceive as negative. Your perception of that is just as valid as them responding to that, in the sense in which whatever you feel, if you're saying on X, Y, and Z dates, I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and I would like you to be there, and they don't show up for any of those things,
right,
and you take that as a sign of flakiness, that does not invalidate the experience just because you didn't talk to them about it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm not saying, I don't think it invalidates the experience, but I'm thinking that so we're just focusing on what's being read, like we're just focusing on the interpretation of validness or the interpretation of like flakiness, or
no, I think at least for me in these types of situations, it's just like the actuality of them being flaky, because in most of these experiences I've had like countless conversations with the person because I have a particular level of empathy, which looks a little different from my resident empath. But most of my empathy tries to stem from mindfulness. So I'm very much like, what is causing you to suffer? Let me in, let me know. Let us have usually I'm having countless conversations, and I very much can kind of have a clear picture of why someone's behaving the way they're behaving, but they still flaky. Like, even if they are, and it's not like judgment or indictment. Oh, you a flaky but you are a flaky person.
Or if it's not
like, it's not stemming from like me saying that this person is flaky or they're distant or they're unreliable. You're unreliable. I know that you have trauma and you have things that happen, and I understand why you're unreliable, but you're still unreliable. It's not me passing judgment. It's more like me just acknowledging this is their behavior, but also coming from a place of, I've sat with this person. They have told me, why they're like this. Not everybody who is like, you're a writer tells you why they are the way they are. So if it's that type of situation, then okay, that's like a different thing. I don't think that's more of like judgment in that scenario. But if you know why, or someone explains their behavior, you can still be like, this is your behavior, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I guess I'm having like a hard time trying to understand that, like, not that it doesn't invalidate it, but you know why they're like that. You're like, okay, I know why you're unreliable. You're unreliable. And then like I guess my thinking is that, like, you understand why they're reliable, yet you still continue with a relationship with them, and they're still unreliable. So then, like, what? Like, I don't understand. Like, nothing. Okay, so nothing's being said. Nobody. Like, you're still just gonna keep suffering. Like, you're still just, even though you have the power to like remove yourself out of the situation or to do something differently, so you don't have to suffer or feel that way. Like, is it really
No,
Like,
I don't think the goal is that to say, oh, I understand all these things, but keep suffering. I think it's the acknowledgement that your emotions and actions don't exist in a vacuum, and that most of the time in these situations, it takes you a point of time before you're like, this is unhealthy, and because not everyone.
How long does it take for someone to recognize that and then do something about the situation?
I think that's a personal thing. I think it really does depend on the person.
And this is why ride or dies exist.
I think it's a form of, like, you need to sit there and figure out how things affect. Because, for example, let's take basic example. You're in a relationship where only one of the people, like, your partner is always the one complaining. You're always the sunshine. Or vice versa, right? In that situation, they have actual problems that they're complaining about. This is a real thing. Like, it's a real valid elephant in the room situation. But that doesn't mean that your feelings about what they have to say are invalid because they don't exist in a vacuum. And it's different if they complain to you, but immediately after they're like, hey, that was a lot. You know, how are you doing? I'm working on it this way and that way. Don't take that home with you. It's different if somebody's doing that and then taking care of you on the side as well, or acknowledging that you are a person and you're going to have responses to what they have shared with you, versus I only contact you when I have problems, like dear friends or like ex-lovers or whatever, who are like, I literally don't talk to you unless I have issues. That is problematic, and they might not be horrible people. They might genuinely have no one else that they trust to share these things with. But I think acknowledging that, it's probably like, even if it's subconscious or whatever, you don't want to force them to feel like they have to talk to you when they don't want to. Like, clearly that's when they want to, but creating those boundaries sometimes involves making decisions without involving them in the process. Like, okay, you do these things. This is how I perceive them. This is how they make me feel. I don't think you're a horrible person, but these are my personal boundaries. I can listen to you talk about it this much, and that's it. Like, I'm gonna send you to someone else or to a therapist or something, because this is my personal limit.
But see, I think that's what happens. So you have a relationship in which the person who is the receiver of the ride or die benefits, because I think we need to like say that so people know what we're talking about. We're just kind of going back and forth, like, well, this person, that person. The person that is
romantic relationships.
It doesn't matter. Okay. It doesn't matter. It kind of works for everything. So the receiver of the ride or die benefits has this person that they are utilizing for romantic relationships, whatever they need done, that person is always going to be there for them. I think the pressure is then put on the person who is receiving the ride or die benefits, and then they end up feeling obligated to that person. And I think kind of what you were saying, like, oh, well, what kind of care are they giving the other person? I think they feel a pressure to kind of be there for them, and that could even turn toxic because they're like, well, you know, in a romantic relationship, as an example now, Susie has been there since day one. She was there when I was like living out my car, and you know, when I cheated on her and had kids out of our side of our relationship, and blah 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 blah. I need to be with her now after all of the things that I've done. Even if I don't care for her in that way anymore, because I'm used to them, they become like a commodity in my life. They become something that I can use to get what I need, just like emotionally, my own self-care or whatever. That might turn into a toxic relationship that they then build because they feel like they should, based off of the things that other person has done to them.
And it might be a resentment almost underneath, even though it's not entirely logical, but it might be a like, damn, I have to stay with you now. Right. Like, versus I actually care about you and appreciate what you did. It might be like, oh, my conscience compels me to stay with you in this situation because of all the things you've gone through. And don't nobody want that.
Interesting pressure, because like nobody wants that. I don't want to be with you because you feel obligated to be with me after all of the suffering that we've endured, and you are usually the one perpetrating that suffering.
You're not going to really be yourself in that relationship. You can't really be yourself if you feel obligated to have to be there.
Right.
But I don't know how much of that kind of translates to the person who is the ride or die, because they might feel that affection that they are now getting is genuine.
Yeah.
So that's like really scary.
Or they might feel it's
because they feel like they deserve. There's like a level of I deserve this now because of all the things that I've been through.
Yeah.
And they may not look at it as this person that's like resigning to be with me or resigning to continue this relationship.
They may not care,
which is really scary. How many times have you been through something with someone in a family relationship, friends, or a romantic, and they may resign to still be in a relationship with you because you've been through so much, and they feel like they put you through so much. and you don't recognize that as a thing that's happening.
That's really close.
That's really
Close
scary.
to home.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But I mean, I think you got to go through at least one type of that relationship, like romantic, familiar, or otherwise, before you can get to that point where you're like, you know what, I am somebody who now establishes like clear boundaries and like cut shit off when it like is no longer like bringing me peace of mind, like my self-care feel threatened, this interaction give me anxiety all the time, or it's always about you, blah blah blah. I'm like, you have to go through some stuff first before you like hit that point or able to do that, instead of just kind of being like, remove yourself from this. Like it really does, I think, take time. And I feel like what often happens with like the ride or die, that shit becomes a pattern. It's like your lifestyle. At this point, I think if it becomes a
professional rider,
it's a lifestyle. Like it's a lifestyle. Like if it becomes a lifestyle, that's when I'm worried. But if it seems to be like maybe one-off occurrences, or even if you know what, you have a toxic friendship, you have a toxic family, you might have all three happening like
at the same time,
at once, and you probably will at some point in your life to be able to know how to like identify it in those different areas. But if it's like that with everybody, or if that's like the running trend, then I think you got some issues.
Because then I feel like to a large extent you have some part playing in that. Like, I don't know, like going back to the empathy, I'm like, if people share things with you, you are creating that environment for them. And it's not a negative thing by any means, but it's like if people who are in your space are not respecting that, or like being like, all right, like this cup, I filled it, let me clean it a little. Like if they're not, if it's not that mutual thing we talked about where it's like, okay, like I can play this role and I'm okay doing that because it brings me joy to be that person for you. But if I need XYZ, I also feel like I can depend on you to talk about this or whatever. Or even just to have space. Like I can depend on you to say, hey, I need space after processing this. And like know that that's not going to be a thing. But I think a lot of the times it's very one-sided. It's very one person like demanding and another not. And tied to that, I was going to ask you guys, do you feel like there are differences in terms of the levels of toxicity that people are willing to take with romantic partners versus friends versus family?
Definitely.
Like how much shit, like is it the same as in I'm just a person who doesn't take shit in general, or do you think it differs depending on
I think it differs.
Totally different.
I think it differs depending.
Okay.
And I think it differs depending on the person. Because there are some people who are willing to take shit from their family, but God forbid a friend say something out of pocket, they gonna be like, I don't care what you talking about, that's it. I don't want to be your friend no more. Fuck you. I'm done. Or a romantic relationship where they're willing to take all the bullshit. I will take every single piece of shit you dip.
I'm gonna cut off all my family.
All my family. I don't need no friends. It's just you. That's it. I don't care.
You terrible, but we together.
But we lying or I'm gonna die.
Me and my boyfriend.
Don't say that. Please don't say that. But I think it's like it varies. So like I try to maintain personally a Sierra a healthy level of all of that, and I probably if I don't care about you, and I'm at the age now, and I'm getting older now, and I love it.
That does have a big
It
factor.
does. That has a big factor on what's happening because if there's a person who I am not a friend with, and they start giving me something that I will give that shit right back. I'm not dealing with it. I don't care about you. I told my mom. I told my mom.
What you tell your mama? What you tell your mama?
I said, Mama, the only people I'm willing to take shit from is you and the person cutting my fucking checks. That's it. I don't care. I don't want to hear it. Nope. And if you were a close friend, I might take a certain level of bullshit from you. But there's a certain boundary to that as well. I don't care.
Is that regardless of people who take your shit? So like if you feel like one person or who like, you know what I mean?
Probably y'all.
Everyone takes that.
So that's what I mean. Like, is it dependent on like how much does this person take of what I do? Like, how much do I feel I can bring to this person? And shit doesn't necessarily mean with negative intention. Like, if you are sad or something like that, and you can take it to someone, do you feel like if they were giving you shit, you'd be able to take more? You know what I mean? Or vice versa. It doesn't necessarily mean ill intention. Like, my shit is like me angry and letting it out on this person. It can just mean I'm having a bad day, but you're the person I trust to share that information with. That is shit. Like,
right.
yeah.
I think again that it depends.
Yeah.
Like I don't. I think it's more like an aggression thing for me. So like if you are bringing me negativity in the way that I feel like I'm being attacked or put down in some capacity, then it's like, no, there's no okay time
way
for
to do that. Yeah.
But if you are bringing me something that I feel like I'm also giving you, like my sad, you know, maybe my angry sometimes. I usually don't give my angry to a lot of people, but if that's the case, then I'm like, okay. Again, it's like a mutually exclusive relationship. Like we are going to give each other the same thing. I'm not going to take something that I'm not giving you.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Like I like how you put that.
Yeah, I think that's like an interesting thing to think about, like who, like the balance between like who are you?
What?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I could say with like family relationships, I definitely take a lot. I can bring things, but the stuff that I've taken, I can't bring that level of it. And then with like romantic relationships, it's interesting because I think like trust has to be like trust is like established. Trust has to be established. But generally, like I don't. Do I give? I don't know if I'm giving. I do think I give everything, but like what you said, the angry, like I don't know
if you hand it back to anybody.
I don't know where'd that go.
Oh my Lord! Right inside you, then.
Sitting in there brewing.
You know.
Please don't
journal pages, right?
Those are ride or dies for ourselves.
I give my angry to myself. Like I just
that's a lie. I get some of that too.
Yeah. But I mean, what in terms like my anger about like other people or things? I mean, or like anger about like you, like which anger?
That's interesting.
Like which angry are you giving people? Which angry are you giving to people?
You don't give it to them. Do you give the person you're angry at? Do you give them your anger?
Do you give them the anger?
I feel like you should.
Depends on what.
Because then someone else is gonna receive. Like if you think about it that way, it's like I already have this feeling. If I'm not giving it where it belongs, I'm gonna pass it on to someone who has done nothing. Someone who is probably.
I think it depends on the form that you're in.
If I come home angry.
I think it depends on the form that your anger is taking. So it's okay to give your anger to somebody if you are giving your anger to them in like a ranting style versus you are redirecting your anger at them. I think that's when it becomes problematic. Like if I'm sitting here and I'm like, Tiffany, you know what my boss did to me today, that bitch, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. That's different from me being like, oh, you know what? I had a bad day at work, so I'm about to cuss you out. That's a lot. Right, that's because a lot different. And like, you my ride or die friend. So that's it. I'm giving it to you.
Be like, so I'm going to go. I'm going to have to end this conversation.
Normally there's like a choice in the matter. Like, hopefully there would be.
Well, like that's mindfulness.
Yeah, I'm just be like, I'm going to go.
For your
talk to you when you come.
Like,
it's not about me.
Normally it's like, I need to talk about something. Can, you know. There's only that option.
Well, I mean, I think that's the way that it kind of like forms.
Versus like,
man,
some people can't handle
snowball.
No, I don't know. Like with family, if it's family that has contributed to where I am, or family that's contributing, like my parents take care of me, literally. Right. If it's family members that have opinions but don't contribute anything else, I don't take any shit. Like I would do things because my parents have been like blah blah blah. So it's always about. I say like about my nuclear family because like they check on me. They don't just like have demands. They have like done above and beyond what any parent
we will hope that your family does that.
Yeah. So I'm like I'm like, all right, like you give way more positive things than you ask me to do something or dish out shit. Like I'll explain like, hey, like this thing that you just said, I don't feel comfortable, but I feel like I'm more willing to do more for people who do more as well. I'm like, it's a mutual, and vice versa. I'm like, if I dish out something or when I have dished out in my teenage years, I'm like, they weren't like, we don't love you anymore.
That's why it's hard with mothers because they like birth you and
and they've like, gone through or if I'm sitting here like stop asking me that I'm indecisive, they're not like, you know what, disowned, like they're like, all right, cool, like let's talk about it. Relationships, I think I could take more maybe. I don't know. I have a very short fuse there. Friendships, I also have a very short fuse there. I could probably, but that goes with like how much I feel like other people are willing to take, which is not always what they project, but what I perceive.
Yeah, that's
like,
true.
oh, if I did this person would not be there for it, so I'm not gonna be here sitting here.
So,
taking
but
it.
is that something that you think and don't give them the opportunity
That's
to?
what I was
It's
saying.
or is
I
it
think that's
something?
what
I feel like
that's what I
I
think,
feel
yeah.
like it's like they shouldn't. Like if I was exhibiting this behavior, they shouldn't have to deal with that. Like
Yeah.
they're not my therapist, they're not my parent. They shouldn't have
But that
to sit
could
there
lead-
and take this.
that could
But
lead
at the
to,
same
like-
time, I do. It doesn't always mean I'm not taking this shit, therefore I'm not talking to you anymore. At least if I'm not taking this shit, then I'm going to talk to you about it. I'm gonna be like, hey, you did this. I feel uncomfortable with it. Is there a reason for this? Like it usually leads into conversations where like if somebody does something, it doesn't mean in friendships or relationships. It has to be something big where I'm like, I can't take this. Like my hard limits are abuse, so physical abuse, verbal abuse, and cheating. Like those are my hard limits. Anything else, if somebody does something, I'm like, let's have a conversation first. And then if I still feel like invalid, then I might distance or cut off. But usually it's not that.
Invalid
Usually,
in what way? Invalid to
Like-
you?
yeah, invalid to me. Mostly in relationships. In friendships, I rarely cut friendships off. Like I'm like because I don't open up to a lot of people. So like I might distance for a time, but I don't like I'm not like, oh, I'll never be friends with this person again. I might be like, we're in a weird place right now. Might need a little bit of space. Like, but I don't really like people that I have been like acknowledged like this is a close friend. I don't know. Like I don't cut off like that. I'm not like never ever again. We're not gonna talk because of this horrible thing that has happened. Usually it's like distance, but I still love you or whatever. I would say maybe similarly in relationships or love partnerships, depending.
I think you brought up a good point about perception in terms of giving that person an opportunity.
Yeah.
And like that's something that I've been working on. I can say personally in terms of like us, lovey-dovey. But yeah, like I think for so long you operate a certain way and you don't even think another person would want to like take. I think like you somehow make it up in your mind that like I can never bring this
To this person, yeah.
yeah, and you just internalize it, and
And you're
so
like, who said that? I have hands. I can carry some of this for you.
But why?
yeah.
Why? Because I feel like it's not. I don't know.
that's unnecessary.
No, I'm not in the context of
Why?
your relationship now. Like, but why do you feel like that person can't carry something for you, or you feel like you set a precedence for so long that it can't be unbroken? Did I just stump you?
Yeah, I mean slightly, but I could speak to like, I mean some of the stuff I want to talk about is like some of the stuff that I like need to talk about in terms of like just getting things off my chest is like really like heavy. It's really hard to talk about. And when we were friends.
evolution.
We were friends.
You
We
gotta
were
get to a
friends.
point
We
where
were
you're
friends.
comfortable.
We've been friends like since
Since birth. No.
yeah, since middle school. And so in middle school, like I couldn't come and talk to you about like some of the things I was experiencing. I was never. What happens at home stays at home.
Yeah.
So some of the stuff that was happening, I like
You didn't feel like you could talk.
you could never
That makes
yeah.
sense,
And so I feel like for a very, very long time that's just kind of how that relationship metastasized. I think later down the line I opened up more and more, but you know, actually sitting down and talking about like how our friendship operates was actually a really good thing because I got to see that in some areas you feel restricted, you know? And so that brings like, okay, let's have some transparency here. We shouldn't just operate like like clinically, like this is a doctor's office. This is just how we operate. No, we should talk about like how we interact with one another and like, you know, the effects it has on in terms of like us being able to fully express ourselves and feel like I have your back or you have mine.
And that speaks to the trust of it. Like, I think it's easier to ride or die when you trust the person to have positive intention. When you're like, if they had anywhere else to put this, they would not put it on me. But like,
Yeah. And also trust that the person isn't gonna like that what you tell them.
they're not going to turn it around.
Yeah,
on
they're
you.
not gonna use it.
Yeah.
Like,
Because that's my
tool
reason.
against
Like,
you.
I can talk if I feel like
Yeah.
this might be turned around against me. Either this person's going to talk to other people about my situation, or like they're going to turn around and be like, I know this about this person, I'm about to use them again. If I feel any element of that, I'm like, I'm not telling you
like
shit.
if I feel like what I say to you is going to be used as leverage, that's a problem. I'm like, but most of the time I feel like, I mean, let's not act like Black families don't cultivate like bubbles of like privacy. Like it's
you don't tell that.
like you out here telling my business. No, mom, mom, I'm not.
But that's funny because mom's always telling your business. Mom be the first one like, girl.
Oh my gosh.
Let me tell you what so and so did. I'm so disappointed. Like, thanks, mom.
Like if you coming from a family where it's not a running policy to just be open, we are open and transparent.
That mom episode gonna be like 3 hours.
It really is.
I can't do that.
It'll be fun. All right, so a couple of our listeners slid into our DMs.
Hey, they did.
So it's pretty exciting. Someone talked about bridges, about how like it shouldn't feel like it's coming from one side, like one person is like doing all the work for themselves and for the other person, which like we talked about can be both of the people's faults. Like, see, you brought up a good point about the whole like, well, who told you that you can't share that? It's like you could end up building a bridge on both sides, but off your own doing, where like the other person would help you if they knew what was going on, but you're just out here being Bob the Builder. So I don't know, like that idea of like
just made me think about Beast in the Builder. Sorry.
Anyway, I can't. So yeah,
I had one of my listeners and friend, old coworker. Hey, you know what I'm talking about? She kind of went along the same lines. It's like she's a very loyal person, so she does kind of stick to the ride or die narrative. And the reason that you take so much bullshit from the other person is because they feel like, oh, if I can do whatever I want to you, that means that you probably don't care about yourself in some capacity. And I feel like that kind of holds true. It's like people can only do what you allow them to do to you, and there does have to be a certain level of self-awareness and kind of like self-care to kind of take care of yourself in those situations and say, okay, this is my hard limit, I'm not dealing with this kind of stuff, even if you're my friend, my romantic partner, or even my family member. And I think that it can be a lot harder when it's a family member because we are kind of brought up to kind of think like, oh, I gotta take whatever is coming from my family, mom, dad, siblings, maybe not extended family so much, but I wonder how much of that is kind of in the like small nucleus family. So like the core, like mom, dad, siblings, how much do you kind of take that level of like negativity that might be thrown at you? So it's literally about self-care though.
That's so like beautifully put. Like the idea of, because sometimes it's not a choice. Like it's like these hard limits. Sometimes it's like, oh, I sat down and decided, but sometimes it's like I literally cannot process it because of the level of anxiety that permeates my like aura if I try to deal with it. So it's like sometimes like you being aware of yourself or like self-care, just like in those moments you're sitting there and you're like, there's no amount of self-care that I can do in this particular situation that would make this okay. And it's like sometimes your psyche decides for you what you can take and what you can't. And people are always quick to be like, oh no, you just cut that person off. How? And it's like sometimes your literal psyche is just like, I can't handle this right now. So I am not trying to die. So I'm going to step aside and deal with it separately and maybe step in with a different mindset, or I'm going to just remove it entirely. But it's like not a... just like, oh, I thought about it logically, and the calculations showed that.
I decided I'm not riding. I got out the car. I was still moving.
I have gotten out of a car.
I couldn't sit here no more. I had to end.
So is it like ride or lose yourself?
I think
kind
die
of,
can
like
lose a part of
that's what
part
I
of you
was
was dying.
I think die could like be definitely interpreted as a different thing.
So, like you are losing yourself to this other person who is taking advantage of you. Run. I know for me personally, I've kind of come against the ride or die narrative in like my family situation a little bit more, and I'm like, I'm definitely willing to be there for my family. Like, I'm here. You got me. But there's certain levels of bullshit that I'm just like unwilling to tolerate in that as well. Like just recently I had to like curse out a family member. I'm like, I know that you expect certain things from me, but I am an individual and I also have a life. So you can't just think you're going to be able to call on me at any second moment or when you snap your fingers. And I'm going to just be like, up here I am at your command. Hello, sir. No, that's not happening. So I think there definitely has to be some self-awareness in that.
Yeah.
Because nobody else is going to want to take care of you if you aren't willing to take care of you.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I was gonna say like something along the lines like if you're like used to that, like used to being treated that way for a very, very long time, like you said, sometimes your psyche kind of like picks up for you and starts to do things. And then when you break into that awareness and you realize I have choices, so I'm gonna move out. So like I think it takes some time to like realize that. And then also there's like, you know, legitimately like real sources, like having money to like be able to do things, to be able to change your situation. Yeah, but it's just.
Okay. All right, guys, this has been awesome.
Yay.
And our social media, Twitter and Instagram are at GetYLP. We have a Facebook page.
Same
and you can
deal.
always...
Same name, the Get Your Life
Get
Project.
Your Life Project. So you can slide into the DMs there or comment. If you have any of our personal ones, you can do the same.
And you can also find episodes on our Facebook because we post them there.
Bi-weekly. Every
Bi-weekly.
Wednesday.
Every Wednesday.
All right. So, friends,
How many of us have them?